We weren't afraid of dying anymore. We were afraid of coming back. Oswin promised he'd write my ma if I bought it. I'm the one who had to write his. I watched him go over the top during the big push in the Ardennes. He was halfway across the mud when a machine gun opened him up from belly to throat. He felt like a sack of laundry, and I spent the rest of the night listening to the rain and pretending it wasn't him. I could hear gurgling his last out there in the dark. We were told it was the push to end all pushes, a final glorious charge. For thousands of boys like Oswin, it was. But for him, and for the others, being wrong was just the beginning. It started at dawn 2 days later. The fog was so thick you could taste the iron in it. A sentry started yelling, his voice cracking. Not a yell of attack, but of pure, jaw-unhinged confusion. We all scrambled to the firing step, rifles up, and saw them. Figures. Standing in the middle of no man's land. Just standing there. Not charging, not taking cover. Still as headstones. The captain sent a few of us out, bayonets fixed, hearts hammering against our ribs. As we got closer, the shapes resolved into our own uniforms, caked in mud and gore. I saw a shock of familiar blonde hair, and my blood went cold. It was Oswin. He was standing there, his tunic a stiff, dark map of the wounds that had killed him. We brought them back. There was no joy, not really, just a deep, shivering wrongness. We helped them over the parapet, and I put a hand on Oswin's arm. It was cold. Not cool from the morning cold. It was the deep, cellular cold of a butcher's slab. The medics swarmed them, shouting in disbelief. Men with shrapnel blooming from their skulls, men with bullet holes you could see straight through, all walking and standing as if they were just back from patrol. They had no pulse. They didn't breathe. We tried talking to them. We asked what it was like, where they had been, if they saw God. For a full day, they gave us nothing. They just stood in the dugouts, their eyes fixed on some point beyond the trench wall, their faces as pale and placid as plaster masks. Then Oswin turned his head, a slow, stiff movement like a rusted hinge. He looked at me, but his eyes looked through me, and he spoke. His voice was a dry rasp, like dirt scraping on stone. The clay is not yet fired. One by one, the others picked it up, a low, toneless chant that crawled under your skin. The clay is not yet fired. We backed away from them then. That was when the real fear began to curdle in our guts. Within hours, the entire front fell silent. No rifles, no artillery, no mortars, just the wind whistling over the wire. We heard later the Germans were having the exact same problem. A ceasefire was called, not out of peace, but out of a shared holy terror. We started calling them the Clay Men. They refused orders. They wouldn't eat, or sleep, or even sit. They carved out their own section of the trench and stood there in perfect ranks, unblinking day and night. When the sun came out, they'd retreat into the deepest dugouts, away from its warmth. The rats, which were everywhere, wouldn't go near their part of the line. Soon, the crows arrived. Men in dark suits and bowler hats who didn't belong in a trench. They swarmed the place, notebooks out, whispering to each other. They studied the clay men like pinned butterflies, asking them questions that got the same dead-earth reply. They posted military police everywhere, warned us that any letter home mentioning the situation would be seen as treason. Our war zone became a laboratory cage. The silence was worse than the shelling had ever been. It gave you too much time to think. We'd look at the clay men, at our former friends, and wonder, is that what happens now? Do you just get up and walk it off? Is there any point to any of this, if death itself has been demoted? Then, one morning, it changed. Without a sound, without a signal, Oswin turned. The others turned with him, a single organism. They unslung their rifles and let them clatter to the duckboards. They took off their helmets and dropped them in the mud. And then they started walking. not east, towards the enemy, but west, towards the roads that led home. Officers screamed at them to halt. The MPs raised their rifles. We just stood there, watching the ghosts of our friends desert the war. They walked right through the reserve lines, a silent, shuffling army of the dead, with Oswin at their head. A young lieutenant, no older than me, finally broke. He ran in front of them, his face pale with panic and rage, and drew his service revolver. He shrieked every threat in the manual, called them cowards, traitors, monsters. The clay men didn't slow down. Oswin walked right up to him. The lieutenant, trembling, levelled the gun at Oswin's face and pulled the trigger. The crack of the shot was deafening in the silence. We all flinched. A dark hole appeared right in the centre of Oswin's forehead. He stopped. He didn't fall. He didn't even blink. He just slowly, deliberately, reached up a muddy hand. He pinched the mangled lead slug from the wound as you'd pull a splinter. The hole in his skull sealed itself with a soft, wet sucking sound. He looked from the bullet in his palm to the terrified lieutenant. He took the revolver from the boy's limp, unresisting hand. For a second, I thought he would use it. Instead, he simply squeezed. The steel of the weapon groaned and twisted in his grip, bending into a useless, mangled knot. He dropped it to the lieutenant's feet. Then he turned and continued his long walk home. The others followed, their cold eyes never leaving the back of his head. The war ended a week later. The ceasefire became permanent. It turns out the governments of the world weren't afraid of other men with guns anymore. They'd spent years perfecting that kind of fear. What they were afraid of, what they had no answer for, was an army of men who had already died and decided it wasn't final. We stopped fighting each other because we all had to start watching the roads, waiting for our own dead to come marching home.